hello. Does anyone remember me? It's been a while since I have made a video. I took a summer break because we all love summer breaks. Yeah, I think my last video was at the end of May, and I don't think I've done any wrap-ups either since like April, if even. I just kind of got burnt out on that. But I figured what I would do today is talk to you all about some of my favorite books that I've read since like May till now. That seems cool. I'm gonna do that. Right now I'm making myself an iced coffee, and I am the last person in my generation who drinks regular whole milk. Sorry, y'all, not an oat milk lady. Love me my just whole cow's milk. That's just me. Anyone's curious, I get this cold brew concentrate from Trader Joe's, and then it's just 2 parts milk, 1 part cold brew, and then to make it cutesy and a little teensy bit sweet, I put in a tiny bit of maple syrup. I know, I can't even believe it myself. Just the littlest amount. I love just a tiny bit of sweetness in my coffee. Okay, I'm gonna stir it with a fork. Just real aesthetic over here. Now I have our coffee, and now I can talk to you all about books. Hello, friends. Okay, so some updates. I know I was supposed to do this really long hiking trail in July, which I did 3 days of. Hi, Rosie. Yeah, I did 3 days of that and then decided it wasn't for me. There's actually 1,000,001 reasons. I got hurt, I got sick, and got lonely. And it was a combination of a lot of things where I decided, not this time, not right now. So that's okay. I just got off of having a month off of work though, which was pretty incredible. Yeah. I don't know if I took any horizontal footage, so I would put some footage in here, and I think I might, but you might have some vertical videos, and that's very, very like noob YouTube energy, but here it is. Okay, yeah, there's a couple horizontals in there, but mostly vertical because that's how much I was not in the YouTube video mode. So, yeah, so let's talk about what I read in May that really stood out to me, and then I'll talk about June and then July. Okay, so first things first is I read White on White, and holy cow, I loved this book. If you don't know, this book is about a woman who is getting her PhD in medieval art, and she's studying the body in medieval art. And she's staying in Paris and renting a flat from this couple. It's another academic and his wife own this flat. But when she gets there, she learns that the wife is actually going to be staying at the flat with her, because the husband and the wife are kind of going through issues. Well, you don't really know that. It's kind of mysterious why she's there, and she's an artist. And she just sort of starts unraveling, the wife starts unraveling throughout the book, and the student is sort of like, kind of enjoys her company, and then it gets weirder and weirder. But either way, I really loved it. I really loved its commentary on art. It kind of reminded me of The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante, but if the main character, the mother in The Lost Daughter, the older mother, I'm forgetting her name, was a little bit more unhinged. I mean, she was unhinged in her own way with like stealing the doll and everything, but it was kind of like older middle-aged woman is kind of projecting onto younger woman. Yeah, and I loved it. It was a short book. Every word, every sentence was like beautiful. Oh, it was definitely a 5-star read, one of the best books I've read this year. So that was White on White. Then I read such a romp. I read The Latinist by Mark Prinz, and this came out this year, and I feel like I have not heard it talked about very much, and it was super good. It's a novel that's kind of a retelling of Daphne and Apollo, the myth in Greek mythology where basically Apollo is kind of obsessed, kind of that stalker kind of love for Daphne, and then Daphne turns into a laurel tree as she's trying to get away from Apollo. There's kind of that famous sculpture of the myth. So it's about a young girl, maybe not young, mid to late 20s, getting her PhD at Oxford in classics, and she has this advisor who basically, he's Apollo and she's Daphne, and the premise is that he screws up her recommendation letters and kind of messes up her career in order to keep her at Oxford and close to him. And it's sort of about that entire conflict most of the book, and involves just some like lovely things like an archaeological dig in Italy, and just all this really interesting history. And I love, again, an academic romp with a mix of Greek retelling. It was just such a good book. It's like been a while since I've read a novel that kind of has a plot that I just really liked. So I really, really liked this book and highly recommend it. Yeah, and then the other book I read in May that was just so lovely and sad but just beautiful was Women Running in the Mountains. And this is a Japanese translation. It was just recently, I think, republished last fall, and it has an introduction now by Lauren Groff. But this writer is actually the daughter of the author who wrote No Longer Human, which is a kind of Japanese classic, and he committed suicide. So she's his daughter, which I didn't really know until after I finished reading it. So very interesting, just author history. But this is a book about a woman who, I think it's in the 80s in Japan, and she gets pregnant out of wedlock but decides to keep it. And she's from a very poor working class family with an abusive father. And it's all about her just having the baby, figuring out how to get independence from her family. And it's just gorgeous. Like, it's just very much present. And the narrator, the young woman, is just, she'll just be walking down the street and write these beautiful sentences about just her observations of like the sun and the sky. And the whole point of Women Running in the Mountains is her like ideal of like a sanctuary or a place of peace is her being with her child in the mountains somewhere. So the whole book is sort of her trying to get there and make choices in her life for her own empowerment and for her child. So it's really, really beautiful and insular and just a lovely, lovely book. I feel like I'm just, yeah, those were the best books I read in May. They were like so good. Okay, so now June was weird because I got COVID and I couldn't read for like a really long time because I got really bad brain fog and like couldn't do anything but basically watch shows. So I didn't read a ton in June, but let me double check, but I'm pretty sure I only had one book that really blew me away. Okay, Yep, I was right. I did read some things in June. Like, I think I read about 7 books, but I'm just going to talk about one because this is the only one that seems to matter to me, and that is Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. I can't believe I hadn't read this book until now. I have read, I actually still haven't read all of Marilynne Robinson's books. I've read Gilead and I've read Leela. And then I've read some of her nonfiction, but I still have not read Home or Jack. So I need to read those two. And I had this really old copy of Housekeeping that was actually falling apart, but I went to my library at work and I put some book tape on the edge. But yeah, this book was maybe behind Mrs. Dalloway. Mrs. Dalloway and this book are my 2 top books I think that I read this year. I can't even, like, this book is art. I don't know what to say about it. It's, some of the writing is just the most gorgeous language I've ever heard, and it's just so tender and lovely. It's about basically 2 girls who are sisters who get abandoned by their mother and go to live with their grandmother. It's set in, I believe, sort of outside Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, maybe because that's where Marilynne Robinson grew up. And their aunt ends up coming to take care of them when their grandmother dies. And their aunt is basically a total, like, I don't want to say vagrant, that seems like a harsh word, but they're like a train hopper. They don't stay in one place for very long. They are not what the town would call civilized, and she lives very differently and chaotically, but she comes in and becomes the main caretaker for these 2 girls. And it's just a beautiful look at people who are on the margins in society, and how they fit in and how you choose to live in a world that maybe doesn't suit you. God, everything about this book is just so lovely. I can't recommend it enough. It's just very, also, like, if you like reading things about, like, childhood and adventures, like, they're constantly going over to this lake that they live nearby that's very deep, and it's like there's like adventures walking across a train trestle and like all this stuff that's just like so, like, to me felt like viscerally, like, also summer. Like, I don't know, I loved that I read it in the summer. It's just such a beautiful book. So I cannot recommend Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson enough. It made me understand Leela more, one of her other characters. She tends to write these characters, these female characters that just really do not fit in, quote unquote, and are just kind of wanderers that never stay in one place. And I'd be really curious to maybe read more of like a character study on that, because the aunt in this book and Leela are very, very similar. So yes, read Housekeeping, please. So lovely. Okay, so that was June. I read some other things, but we're not going to talk about them because you can look at my story graph if you really want to know. Yeah, okay, so then let's talk about July. I actually think almost every book I read in July was an incredible read. So let's get started with, what is the first book I read in July? Oh, okay. So I read In the Distance by Hernan Diaz. And this was a recommendation from a couple people on Instagram. I was asking, like, what books should I read on the trail? And this is the one that came up. I know Hernan Diaz is getting a lot of buzz right now because he wrote Trust, which came out this year, which has now been longlisted for the Booker Prize, which I have not read. But I did read In the Distance earlier in July, and it was so beautiful. It's about a young Swedish immigrant who gets separated from his brother on the way to America, and he gets on the wrong boat and basically ends up in San Francisco. He was supposed to end up in New York, and the whole book is him trying to cross America to get to his brother, but he keeps hitting obstacles and obstacles. And he, it's just kind of going through these different encounters that he has with people in the West, and has like the feel of a Wild West kind of book, but the language is just so beautiful. And again, it follows a character who kind of, I guess, similar themes to Housekeeping, not really, but someone who really just feels like they do not have a place in this society. At one point, he'd been alone for so long wandering in the wild that he comes into a town and is so uncomfortable he like has to leave. So it's very much insular, following this man throughout his life. Eventually, his goal for so long is to get to his brother. So it's just so lovely and beautiful, and kind of also like just really interesting to learn more about kind of history. There definitely was things in there about the like radical Mormons that were murdering people that were trying to go west. And there's also some things in there. I don't know. I thought there was a character in there that kind of was supposed to be a representation of John Muir. Not like a ton, but a little bit, like early naturalist, kind of that sort of vibe. But what I loved about the book is he was constantly going against the grain. So, back in the 1800s when this is set, you have people that are coming west, and he was just desperately trying to go east to get to New York. And I also love how the book just really solidified what it was like back then, how you had no idea where you were. You didn't have information about the geography or anything. You were just kind of going in a direction, and you had no idea what was in front of you or behind you. And yeah, it was just really cool to read. I read it the 3 days I was on the trail, which was cool, but I finished it a couple days after that, and it was just a beautiful read. I'm excited to read Trust, which I think is totally different theme-wise. It has nothing to do with the 1800s or the West, but I think I really like his writing, so excited to read more. Okay, then what did I read? Let me see. Then I read In Delicacy by Amina Kane. I got this book at Powell's in Portland, and I kind of had heard of it. I think I had seen it with its different cover, so I didn't necessarily recognize it. But loved this book so much. Again, insular, about a woman who works as a cleaner at museums, but then ends up one day meets a man in the museum who's very rich, and they get married, and her whole life changes to where she no longer has to labor, and she can fully focus on her art. And it's kind of about her doing that, but even when she has the privilege to be able to write, she still has these constraints around her art. What I loved about this book is that you have no idea when it's set. There's very little indication as to what time period it could be, which I really liked. So it did feel kind of old-fashioned in a way. In the back it says reminiscent of a lost Victorian classic, which I totally felt that. And it was really about her just wanting her own space to do her art. And I love that you never know the character's name until her two female friends say it out loud to her in response to her art, which I thought was really beautiful and like poignant. This book was just cozy, lovely. I read it in like a day because it's pretty short and has like short chapters and wide margins and stuff like that. But loved In Delicacy. So I'm trying to think what I read next in July. I know I read Cult Classic by Sloane Crosley, and I hated it. I thought it was really stupid. And I'm not going to even go into why I thought it was stupid. I just didn't like it. Thought it was overdone, had been done before. Didn't really care about this girl and her exes. Also felt very straight. It was like, oh, you and your current partner refuse to talk about your exes? That's weird. Don't do that. That's dumb. I don't know. I just thought it was stupid. Okay. And then I read Cold Enough for Snow by Jessica Au. And holy shit, the hype is well deserved. I understand why earlier this year everyone was talking about this book and how it was so good. It's a short book, but every sentence, every word matters. It's about a woman, maybe in her 30s-ish, who takes her mother to Japan on a vacation. And it's about them spending time together while she also reminisces, and her mother reminisces about things from their past. And it's just cozy, beautiful, looks at art and literature, and it just is such a lovely, lovely book. My favorite part was when the main character, the daughter, she decides to separate from her mom for a little bit and take a train to this town and then walk, kind of do a little backpack hike thing through these little towns to get back to where her mom was. And just the language of that journey was really, really gorgeous. And yeah, I could like read it again and again. It was just really, really beautiful. I almost want to buy a copy. I got it from the library and I had to return it already, so that's why I don't have it here with me. But yeah, it was so good. Okay, we have 2 books left. So then I read A Ghost in the Throat, and I bought this, I think, in June. I started reading it early July, after I read, I started reading this in early July, but I didn't finish it before I went on the trail, and then it got left at my parents' house, and then it finally got back to me at the end of July, and I just finished it. And this is the story of a woman, mother, who becomes very obsessed and razor focused on this Irish poem. And I am not going to say the poet's name because I do not know the language. But it is basically her trying to uncover anything about this poet from, I believe it's the 1700s, late 18th century. Anything about this poet. She is just trying to understand, going through archives, has this very obsessive, fanatic thing with this poet. And she that's happening alongside her being a mother, her dealing with having a preemie baby, her dealing with having a cancer scare in her breast, like all these things that are very much that she's experiencing as a woman. So she's looking at this poem, wondering where women are in the past, how they're forgotten, and she feels this kinship. And the ghost in the throat idea is this idea that there's all these women who have been forgotten and who are hurting, and they're like stuck in our throats, and we can't help but like, find solidarity with each other. And it was really beautiful and really well written. She's a poet first, which I loved, and I just thought this was a really gorgeous book. I also kind of like the cover a little bit, so it was a good one. I'm glad I have it. I'm glad I bought it. And it has the full poem in the back. And it's her mourning the death of her husband, who was killed. And it's a true story, I believe. So, yeah, and this poem is all that's known about, not all that's known, but there's not much else known about the author. So anyway, give this a read. It was beautiful. Okay, we're almost done. So the last book, if you can believe it, late to the game, that I read in July was The Idiot by Leif Batuman. I know. Okay. So the story with this book is that I started reading it in 2020, and it was my roommates at the time, and then they needed it back, and I think I only got a third of the way through. And I remember loving it, but just, got distracted, had other things to read. But yeah, so I actually finally read the whole thing, and wow, 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 wow. I love Celine so much. She's like maybe one of my favorite characters. And I identify with her so much, and that feeling of when you're like 18, 19, and you're so unsure of everything. Like, it's so well done. I laughed out loud so many times. Like, this book is so dense with humor. Like, it's so funny and so good. I mean, I think if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. Like, every page, I mean, it got almost to the end. Like, towards the end, it was almost exhausting because you're like, you know, with Celine, sounds like it's exhausting to be her because she's moving through the world and just feels like she's constantly in a lost in translation situation. But it's just so good, and I'm very excited to read Either Or, which I've heard some people have told me it's even better than this. So I'm really, really excited. I might even just go buy a copy, honestly. I can't believe I'd do that, but I might. I'm gonna go buy a new hardback book. Who am I? Yeah, so that, y'all, was what I read. The best books I read May through July, basically. And if you're curious what I'm reading now, I am reading All Down, Darkness Wide by Sean Hewitt. And this is a memoir about him coming into his sexuality, and basically it's a perceptive and unflinching meditation on the burden of living in a world that too often sets happiness and queer life at odds, and a tender, honest portrayal of what it's like to be caught in the undertow of a loved one's deep depression. I'm like, I don't know, 75 pages in, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I think it just came out. So a trick you can do at the library is I will sometimes go through books that haven't come out yet and I know are going to be released in a month or two, and a lot of times the library will have them on order. And if you put a hold in early, you can get that hold in before the library even has it. So that's how I got this one so quickly, is I think I saw this on one of those Lit Hub lists or something, and it looks really interesting to me. I know Alex from What Page Are You On is also reading this. I messaged him on Instagram because he was going to buy it at the bookstore, and I was like, I just started it and it's so good. Beautiful, beautiful writing so far. So very into this. And then I'm hoping to read Abigail by Magda Szabo, Hungarian author, because I know it is Women in Translation Month for August. So, and this is a story of a teenager growing up in Hungary in World War II, and I kind of gravitated to it because, you know, Hungary, 2 books set in Hungary, I guess. So yeah, we'll see if I get to that after this guy. Yeah, but that's what's up with me. I'm back to work. I had a lovely time off. I guess the other big thing is thank you all so much. I got 1,000 subscribers while I was on vacation, not putting videos on the internet. So thank you all. That's kind of cool. If you have any, I think I'll probably do a video where I answer any questions, because that's what you do when you get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, right? That's like a thing. If anyone has any questions they want me to answer, feel free and put them in the comments below. Maybe I'll put a thing on my Instagram. Yeah, it can be kind of bad with the socials sometimes and the keeping up with the things, but it was really nice to not, for a couple months, just not post anything, and I don't know. So hopefully I'll get back to making vlogs because I really do like doing that. So yeah, if you have any questions you want me to answer in that video, put them in the comments. Yeah, happy to be back. I'll be making more stuff soon. Happy reading, y'all. Bye.